the use of the word battle plan by Christina, and then because the goal is, all of us have such different situations. Some of us have parents that are very involved. Some of us will be courting or getting to know people whose parents couldn't care less, who don't care at all. We're like, why are you talking to me? This is your thing. And it's not at that point for us to look at that and say, oh my goodness, I can no longer have the perfect courtship model, or oh no, this is not going to work for me anymore, because our Father is in heaven. He is the one we are to please. We're not here to please man. Joshua and I found out very quickly that even though we both grew up in Christian homes, we were both homeschooled, our cultures could not have been more different at all. And culture clash was probably the name of the game for a lot of our getting to know each other, our first year of married life, where it's not at all that there were different goals or different hearts, but our cultures were so different, so vastly different. And so we're trying to please God. We're not trying to say who can be more pure, who can stay further away from the line. We're here to please the Lord in everything that we do, And I remember what Dave, when we were praying in the back room, he said, Lord, we're not here to serve a model, we're here to serve you. And that is very, very true. We're not here to say, we had the most perfect courtship model ever. The thing that was wonderful, again, like we heard already tonight, is that people put so much effort into their careers and into their jobs and into their houses and their hobbies even. And then they go, oh wow, this one looks great. And let me join my entire life to this one that looks great and give them access to my body and my finances, and we're going to share kids, and we're going to share livelihoods. And the things that they don't talk through consistently shock me. It just shocks me. I'm over here going, you didn't know that he didn't want kids? What were you talking about? What did you know? How did you not know that? Or I'm over here going, did you not know that he wanted to be a missionary? Why is that devastating to you? Did you never cover those things? Or someone has a lifelong dream of something, and then they get involved with someone who has different, very, very different dreams. What Christina said about how she's serving the Lord and she's serving her community, and in that, God brought Claudio. So it's not that he is a complete paradigm shift from what she's already been doing. He was part of God's plan for who he created her to be. And I felt that with Joshua, 100%. We met each other very young, very, very young. And I was 7, as many of you know. I was very young. I was 7, 10 years ago. Thanks, Claudia. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I don't know how I got all these kids. That's kind of disturbing. Yeah, I was 7 and considered myself very grown up. And was doing cartwheels across the gym in a dress. And he comes over and he's like, hey, you're almost 8 years old, and you should be more ladylike. And I'm like, oh my word. That guy is so grown up and so gorgeous. And he was 14, so twice my age. He's always been a man to me. He's never been a boy, ever. But we look back at pictures, we're like, you're always grown up to me. And from then on, I always wanted to be a lady. I'm telling you, that was, yeah.
Yes, and she has definitely filled that definition very well as a lady. My story goes way, way back. My parents got married when they were 16 and 17. And they got married when they were actually too young to get married, in the sense they had no support, but God brought them together and they stayed married and they're still married. And then right away they had the 3 of us, so my 2 brothers and myself, so I'm only 19 years different than my dad in age, and so we just kind of all grew up together. So my mentality growing up was that I'm going to get married young. I'm going to get married by 19, 21 the latest. And so that's kind of how I grew up. That was my mentality. I wanted to get married, I wanted to have family, that was my goal. And so around, 19, 20, I was looking for candidates, that would sign up to be a Burley. And fortunately, I should say, because it is fortunate that God kept closing those doors over and over and over and over.
He's like, she's still in grade school, Joshua.
Yes, and I didn't know that. You see, I didn't know what God's plan was. And so the reason why this is an important part of our story is because one of the fundamental principles that I held to as I was looking for a bride was that I really believe that God has a particular young lady picked out, or a particular young man picked out for you. And for me, I didn't want to just kick a door open because I wanted it open. I was willing to accept a no. I was willing to say, you know what, this isn't God's will. I'm not going to push it, because I really wanted God's design for me. And this became pretty clear the last year. The year before I started courting Rachel, I was in a dating relationship with another young lady. And it was kind of fascinating because for me, all the doors had always closed, but this one didn't. And so I actually got to go on a couple dates. I got to know this young lady, and I got to kind of feel what it's like to kind of fall in love a little bit. And it was just very powerful. And yet, for me, I was really looking for, I was willing to receive counsel. And the counsel I was given is, you guys are not a match. And that was hard for me because I was looking at kind of some external things. I was looking at, hey, I've got somebody who's actually interested in me, and I'm sure this is going to work, and I was interested in. But one of the pieces of counsel I got was, you're not a match, and here's why. And it's because you approach life differently than she approached life. And when I really stepped back and looked at what this counsel was, I said, that's actually right. That's actually right. And for me, it was important to follow I couldn't see very clearly on my own. And that's one of the things that, and I was 27 at that time, or 26 and a half or something like that. And so I'm already an adult. I'm already living outside my parents' home. I've already established myself, but I still, at that age, was still desiring to find God's life partner for me. And I had to wait, and I broke off that relationship. It was one of the hardest things I've done in my life, was to say no to a young lady and cause her some serious grief. But what I was after was more important, and that was, I wanted God's life match for me. And so I was willing to look at it from a realistic perspective. And that takes a lot of maturity, and sometimes others have to help you, others had to help me. So right about that time, I was like, okay, I'm done doing this. I really put a lot of effort in trying to find a young lady that would sign up to be a Burley. And they all said no.
Did you leave a resume?
Well, and here's part of what God was doing. God was growing my wife up because she's 7 years younger than I am. So God physically had to grow her up. But God had to grow me up in one important area of my life, and that was humility. I really walked, as a 19, 20, 20-year-old, I really walked around going, gosh, my father-in-law would be just lucky to have me as this grandson, or as a son, because I'm just that good, and I wasn't that good. It really was a false view of myself, and God had to whittle that down for 7 years, just whittle it, to what point I was like, I'm done.
7 years he worked for Rachel.
Right, not even knowing it was for Rachel. So when I said I'm done, God said, okay, now I can begin my work. It was the right time. He brought it to the right point. And at that point, my dad actually got a call from her dad. And they were actually my dad called her dad, and they just exchanged information, like, okay, how's life going? It was we were friends of the family. I met her when she was 7. They moved off to Alaska and then over to Idaho. So we were friends growing up, but she was always too young, and there was other things that I could go into on, if you want to talk about more, that in my mind were like showstoppers. And they weren't. anything to deal with Rachel. They were other things. But when God had me where he wanted me is when God opened the door. And it happened very quickly for us. We started a very informal courtship, probably in February. By April, we were into a formal courtship, and by July 4th, I asked her to marry me. We had known each other for a long time, and so it was like reacquainting as adults, and like, who are you, and who am I, and the Lord just allowed, and there was a long distance relationship. She was in Idaho, and I was in Oregon, and God allowed us to have very good conversations about things that matter. Not just things that you can get into like chit-chat conversations, and those don't really matter when you're talking about someone who could be someday your life mate, the mother of your children, the father of your children, the things that will actually make and break a relationship, cause a lot of pain and suffering for you. It's an important decision, like Dave was saying, it's like the second most important decision you'll ever make, because it comes with such an immediate impact upon your life and the future life you will ever hope to have. So for us, the Lord really connected on a lot of the same things. We're both heading the same direction. We're very intentional about life. That's one of the things that, for me personally, Rachel's intentionality, her intensity, her grace, her elegance, her just pragmatic ability to function as a homemaker, all were areas that I really held in high regard. And it wasn't like I was like looking for something that she would disqualify her, because she wasn't. She would just, the Lord allowed her to be that perfect life mate for me. And it really was a major plus that she was someone I'd already known for a good portion of my life. And so I'll let her finish up.
As we were, the reason that our courtship was so short, it was really just a formal 2 months, is because we'd known each other for so long. And because of how intentional the courtship was. We weren't goofing off, we were talking for long periods of time on the phone about everything. And right about, probably a month and a half in, I thought, this is someone I could follow. I already knew I held him in high regard. I already knew that I admired him greatly. And one thing in our culture that we are programmed to believe as Americans is that if something is easy, it's good, and if something is hard, it's bad. And that's because we're American, really, to be honest. Life is hard. It's hard stuff. You're going to go through losing your house, losing your job. You're going to lose, some of us will lose babies. Some of us will lose people we love. We're going to encounter, everything from house fires to relationship struggles and problems. And parenting is hard. It's hard work. It's a blessed thing, but it's hard work. And the grace that it has been, that marriage is not a war, has been just tremendous. It takes work, and sure, it's frustrating at times, and we don't always see each other, we don't always see eye to eye on anything sometimes. But the fact that we're pulling the same direction and we're headed in the same place, and the fact that being married to Joshua is not a difficult struggle, but that the struggle comes from without. It comes from the jobs and the relationships and the friendships and the kids and all the other things around it has been a mercy, and I'm grateful, intensely grateful for that. I also courted a gentleman for a couple months before I courted Joshua, and it was something where there was nothing I could pinpoint where this is not right, but it was 100 things that weren't right, and I kept trying to mold myself into making this right. And I look back on it not with regret that we went through that at all, because it's part of my story. It had to happen. But I am grateful that we set physical boundaries to where I don't have to look at that and go, whoa, that was someone else's husband. And I did that with someone else's husband. But instead, there were boundaries set in place, and they're going to be different for everyone. The Bible says it's good for a man not to touch a woman. So you have to take that and do with it what you will. And then you have the ability to go forward with me knowing Joshua saying, this is someone I could follow. This is someone who's children will look up to as their father. My children will look up to him as their father. He's going to be, you know, helping take care of my parents in their old age. He's going to be taking, you know, our finances and my dreams and our will, and we're going to be forward moving together. And I could do that with him. And there was a peace that passes understanding. I worked in the bridal industry. I worked with thousands of brides. And that's not a short, I was trying to work it out the other day. I think I worked with as many as 3,000 brides. And I watched women get cold feet. And I watched fiancés come in where I'm like, oh, you should run the other way, run the other direction right now. And then I watched some get married very happily. And I felt no wedding day jitters at all. I felt no cold feet because there was a peace that passed understanding. People say, well, how do you know? And other people say, well, you just know. And I'm like, that is so unhelpful. Why would you say you just know? It's not helpful. But God delivered a peace in my heart that was completely unmistakable. And so I'm very grateful for the difficulty in life that has someone like him to be beside me in it.